Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. Our guest today is Kemal Hamulic. Now, during our conversation, you will see words and phrases appearing on the screen. We will go over those expressions in more detail in a follow-up segment called What'd You Say? You can go to our website and find more information at feellikeyouBelong.com. For now, let's welcome today's guest. Today on Feel Like You Belong, we'd like to welcome Kemal Hamulic to the show. Kemal works in compliant management and human resources for the express companies in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thanks, Kemal, for stopping by.
Thank you for your invitation.
You bet. You are originally from the city of Prijedor in northwestern Bosnia-Herzegovina.
That is correct.
When you have to describe that to Americans that you meet, how do you say where that is? What's the easiest way to get oriented?
I try to tell them that it's really close to the Croatian coast because many people are actually familiar with the Croatia and the coast because it is so beautiful. And it's literally just a few hours of driving time.
And across the Adriatic from a country that Americans may know?
Italy.
Okay.
True. True. Very good. I never thought about that.
East across the water from Italy.
Right. Especially nowadays, everybody knows about Italy and the Pope being elected, and that's very good. I'm gonna have to use that trick.
Great.
With your permission.
Talk with the teacher.
There you go. Thank you.
So, you were a young boy growing up in Bosnia, and 20 years ago, some really tragic happenings occurred in Bosnia. 1992 to 95, the Bosnian War. So how old were you then, and what impact did that have on you?
Well, I believe, 13 or 14 when we left Bosnia, and obviously we left under dire circumstances, not knowing whether it's going to be just for a couple of months, years, what's going to happen, and ended up being forever, I guess. As a child, you don't really think about that so much. You just go through the motions and try to hope that your parents know what's going to happen next, and obviously any sense of security or belonging is gone because you're no longer in your home city, you don't have your friends with you, but as long as your family's together, it kind of gives you hope that it's going to be better.
So the majority of our viewers haven't and hopefully never will have this experience of needing to flee because of war. What is that experience like?
It is very surreal. I have tried to explain many times what that feels like and what that looks like, and I don't want people to understand it the wrong way, but there's a little bit of ignorance with it. My wife would be telling some Americans, the city was besieged and we could not get anything in, we could not get anything out, supplies were not coming to the hospital and so on. And then you would hear comments such as, "Oh my God, was the McDonald's open?" So unless you really had the unfortunate fate of being stuck someplace like that, it is really hard to describe, but it's very surreal in terms of any decency, any humanity that you think that people should have or have is gone, and that makes it very dangerous, very unpredictable.
Well, your particular hometown was actually the site of a massacre.
Yes. In my hometown and around my hometown, they've found 5 different concentration camps and mass graves, which was one of the worst affected. And still to this day, they have several sites that they have not even looked at, and
So how many of your family
Many
members
families.
fled?
My immediate family, some of the relatives, but I'd say that out of the extended family, uncles, aunts, and so on, many of them stayed. I'd say that probably close to 80% of them stayed behind.
And the people who fled, vast majority of the people who fled,
Mhm.
left because they were Muslim.
Correct. That is correct. Or they were coming from a mixed marriage. One spouse was Muslim and the other one was something else.
Okay. So your family evacuated, basically, flew to Switzerland.
We ended up in Switzerland. We had some friends there, and that move to Switzerland ended up being 7 years long. We stayed there for 7 years. That's where I finished my high school, and then we came to the United States back in 1997.
Okay. So you finally land in the U.S.
New York City.
Okay.
New York City. We were escorted.
So from a town of 40,000 to a town of 10 million.
The city that never sleeps. We were escorted through the gates by a Russian gentleman who recognized us by these white plastic bags with blue lettering, and it was the International Organization for Immigration.
Okay.
And it was basically a couple of families from all over the world, Romania, Bosnia, some from Sudan, I think. And he just gathered us looking at the bags and led us through the security and put us on our plane to Grand Rapids.
Okay.
That was my first experience of the United States.
So you're picked up as a boy and plopped down in Switzerland, German-speaking Switzerland.
Actually, it was right on the border between French-speaking and German-speaking. The town is called Bienne, which is French, and all the public buildings, all the street names, everything was displayed in both French and German. Very often you would walk down the street and somebody would ask you something in French, you would respond in German, or vice versa. My high school actually had 3 buildings. One was the German, quasi-German speaking building, then the other one was French speaking building, and there was a building in between that we called Mitteltrakt, which basically meant mixed building.
Okay.
Because both students from French and the German building were shared.
So then you get plopped down in West Michigan,
Replanted for the second time.
and all of a sudden you're having to start on your 4th language.
Fourth language, first obviously was Bosnian, and then German, French, and the fourth language was English. I did have some knowledge of it because back in Switzerland, that was one of the languages that we studied. So I had some basic knowledge that served me well.
What were some of the adjustment challenges for your family and maybe especially the younger members of the family?
Well, the first thing was the food. Nothing tasted right, and what I mean by that, bread was too soft.
Wonder
It
bread.
was too sweet. Meat had no taste. So all of these things, and it took several months to kind of figure out what worked well, what didn't, and what stores to go to.
You
to
finally
buy
found the
certain things.
Mediterranean grocery store?
That took a while. I think you referred to one on 44th in Kalamazoo.
Correct.
It was a little tiny shack before the Bosnians came, and now it's a big store.
If
in
you bring the
part.
customers, they will build the store.
Right, just like in that movie with Kevin Costner. If you build it, they will come.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there you were. What is the challenge? One of the biggest challenges for the Bosnian community today. Now, obviously, 20 years hence, people are getting settled.
Well, I mean, there are many challenges. 20 years ago, I would have told you that they're trying to get used to the system because it's a totally different system. And many older people not knowing the language are going to have issues with adjustment. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. Nowadays, you have a huge generation gap of those individuals who were born here, who were educated here, and who are still interacting with parents from back from Bosnia, and obviously that creates a lot of friction. Very often, when I was in seminars or we had workshops, in my work as an interpreter and kind of a culture broker. I was telling people that there is this role reversal where parents become children and children become parents, just because of the fact that the children are the ones who speak the language and get tasked to do all these things that usually parents would take care of. And I think that's still happening, especially now where the older generation is feeling that they're being left on the side of the road. Back in Bosnia, you did not have adult foster homes where people would go when they're at an old age. You would basically rely on your family to help you out, and here it's quite different. You don't have that safety net anymore. So I think those would be the two biggest problems.
So, given that you've lived in Europe, you've now live in the United States, you've had a chance to experience culture in a way that gives you some understanding and the ability to help people navigate those differences. One of your community commitments now is working with the Community Relations Commission.
Correct.
And tell me about that work. What kinds of things do you do?
The Community Relations Commission is a quasi-judicial body with the city of Grand Rapids. We investigate any kind of perceived or alleged discrimination in housing, employment, racial profiling by the police department, and so on. But our purpose is actually to connect different communities, different stakeholders, and help them understand the city government better and how that works, and obviously to connect city officials with all these ethnic minorities that live in greater Grand Rapids area. And that's what we do. We get people together and we start dialogue.
Okay. Can you give us an example of one
Well,
story of...
for instance, 2-3 years ago, there was an allegation by the Hispanic community and the African American community that the police department was profiling. So what we did is we got together with the leaders within the Hispanic and the African American community. We started a couple of town hall meetings. We had focus groups. We invited Chief Belk to come and speak to these individuals. We went on ride-alongs with the police officers and basically kind of followed the whole issue for several months, just to make sure that all these questions that the community had and felt were not being answered or were not being addressed were actually addressed by the police.
What was the outcome?
The outcome was that Chief Belk actually tasked a couple of people within the city of Grand Rapids with coming up with a program to attract more minorities to Grand Rapids. And just recently we had a report from the city officials that they actually have now a statewide database where they can draw applicants from. So it took several years, but I think there is a commitment to diversity because Grand Rapids is a diverse community. People don't realize that, but it is a lot more diverse than people would think, especially people from the outside who've never been here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you are part of the Bosnian community, and the majority of Bosnians came as practicing Muslims. How many people stick to their cultural and religious ways as they make this transition? Because obviously West Michigan is a predominantly Christian
Correct.
region.
When you talk about Bosnian Muslims, this is a very special group. These individuals are very secular. They observe most of the tenets of Islam, but they will never adhere to maybe strict hard line that you would see elsewhere, for instance in the Middle East. Very often you will actually see people who go to the mosque and pray, and yet they smoke. But one of the tenets of Islam is not to smoke. Very often they would socially drink alcohol, but then they would abstain during the month of Ramadan. Whereas if you talk to somebody from the Middle East, they would tell you that smoking and drinking are prohibited, period. Now, there are groups of people within the Bosnian community that actually adhere to more stricter Islam, and you kind of have to look at many different factors that come into play. Is it the person who's younger? Is it the person who's been born in Bosnia? Is it somebody who's from a mixed marriage? One parent is a Bosnian and the other one is not. But I would say that most of them are spiritual. They are religious. They observe most of the religious holidays, especially Ramadan. I wouldn't say that 100% of them attend services, but there are two different congregations that are very strong in Grand Rapids, so there must be some kind of support.
Okay. And as we wrap up today, what would you, as you look at an American audience, what would you like them to know about Bosnian Americans?
Well, not just about Bosnian Americans, but in general, there is no right or wrong when you think about it. Very often people say, well, you know, here in the United States we do this, or I would hear my own mom say, well, back in Bosnia we did it this way. It's not necessarily better or worse, it's not right or wrong, it's just a different way to look at certain things. We all, especially here in the United States, we all come from so many different backgrounds. We have different moral and religious beliefs and values, and I think that the very first step, and one thing that people have to understand, is that in order to communicate better, you have to be able to do something that is really hard, and that is to listen. Before saying anything, you have to be able to actually really truly listen to the other person. And Bosnians are very open. They are very friendly. We have this one expression where we always leave 1 cup of coffee extra just in case somebody stops by. And being that open, sometimes people feel that they get offended with certain things because we know to be a little bit blunt and a little bit direct. But it's never meant, or we don't mean to offend. It's just the way how people are. Just because they want to be friendly with you, they want to have a good relationship, and for us, that starts with being sometimes brutally honest. So there's no superficial "how are you" and "I'm fine, how are you? Oh, nice to hear that." Unless you really want to listen to my problems, don't ask "how are you."
Good advice. So I want to thank you so much for stopping by today.
You're welcome.
And that'll wrap it up for today on Feel Like You Belong. For the expressions from Kemal, the first expression you heard was fled. I had said that people fled the country. Fled is the past tense of the verb to flee, which means to run away from danger. Kemal said that the members of the Community Relations Commission went on police ride-alongs. Many communities have programs where citizens ride in the police patrol cars along with officers who are on duty. This gives the community members a way to understand the job the police are doing. In the case of this Grand Rapids program, the commission members were monitoring police behavior for signs of racial profiling. If you want to look for other difficult vocabulary, it will be explained on the Feel Like You Belong website under the What'd You Say section. The American holiday of Halloween comes on the last day of October. It's one of those holidays where schools and businesses are not closed and not everyone celebrates. However, if you want to join in the fun, I really encourage you. If you've seen Halloween, you think it's all about parties and costumes, but where did it come from? Originally, the holiday is a recognition of November 1st in the Christian church as All Saints' Day. One of the meanings of saint is a friend or relative who has died before you. Halloween comes on the evening before All Saints' Day and is spelled with an apostrophe between the two E's. Halloween is an abbreviation of All Hallows' Eve. In the United States, whether people do or don't celebrate All Saints' Day in church, they don't usually think of Halloween as a religious holiday. It's just a day for dressing up in costumes. Because the theme of the day was inspired by dead people, you will see lots of costumes related to death, for example, ghosts or skeletons. At school parties and later in the evening, children can be seen dressing up like their favorite superhero. Adults often have competitions at parties to see who can dress up most creatively. Last year, for example, my nephew and niece went to a costume party dressed up as the two spokespeople for national insurance companies, Flo and Mr. Mayhem. If you're someone who likes parties or who likes to dress up, ask your American friends about what they do to celebrate Halloween. Maybe they'll invite you to a party. For more about Halloween costumes, visit our website at feellikeyouBelong.com. One way that Americans know that a joke is coming is a speaker will set up a joke in a certain way. And there are a handful of different ways that typical jokes get introduced. And so let me give you an example of one type of joke, one genre of joke that hopefully you will get to hear from many of your American friends and coworkers. This particular kind of joke is a something walks into a bar. Now, the bar is the scene of friendship, of laughing, and you really never know who's going to be coming in through the door next. Let me give you one of these jokes. A grasshopper walks into a bar, hops up onto the bar stool, and the bartender looks up and says, "Hey, did you know we have a drink named after you?" The grasshopper said, "Really? You have a drink named Fred?" Now, of course, if you don't understand the connection between bars and grasshoppers, you'll need to go to our website, feellikeyouBelong.com, and check out what's so funny.